All right, and welcome to our digital conference presentation that we're doing. My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm with the Oregon HFMA chapter, and joining me is my cohort in crime,
Michelle. Michelle Cooper, also with the Oregon HFMA chapter.
And we're very, very excited to be sharing this presentation with you and other chapters throughout the country. A while ago, we just want to start with a story explaining how we got here. As I move through a slide, just you can see us a little bit better here. But our story started in the Oregon chapter a while ago when we just had a desire to really engage members who couldn't make it to a conference. And then to make it more interesting, of course, we had the enterprise members that were added, which really increased our population in our chapter. And because of that, we were failing on some of our scores that we were getting back from those enterprise members and our engagement. So we got very active and creative and pushed through this live streaming. And it took a few iterations to get it right, but several years ago, we started down this path. And we've learned a lot, and we just want to share those things that we've learned on how to bring live streaming to your members, how to capture that, lessons learned along the way. And of course, one thing that we wanted to share is that it's very doable, and it's something that every chapter can do without having a lot of techies. Of course, if you have more technologically savvy people, it does help, as we'll point out. But it is something that's affordable and very doable for every chapter. Again, my name is Jeff Johnson, and with me in this presentation is Michelle Cooper. These are the items that we want to cover today. Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope. Great. Thank you.
And our agenda today, we're going to be covering the top platforms, which is a review of those that are available today. We're going to be covering the equipment requirements that are out there to really make this live streaming great for those who are sitting back at home, and also for those who are running the live streaming. And we're going to cover registration, billing, reporting, surveys, and CPE credits or certifications that go out, chapter requirements, speaker requirements, producing, sharing the recorded content. So those are the items that we plan on covering with you today, lessons learned, and we're going to jump into that right now. So as we look at top platforms that are out there today, these are the three that tend to be the most popular. They are Cisco, WebEx, GoToWebinar, and Zoom. As we're talking about this, if you want to recreate the environment that most of us have in our meetings, where you have a presenter up front and a large audience, you really want to look at the webinar package for any of these. That gives you the same look and feel that you would have if you were actually, attending. So that's where we're going to focus our energy today. For comparison, we did put up, there are many other platforms that do exist in the world today. We went ahead and put the link there for anybody who wants to go and do a comparison of all of those. Maybe there's one that fits your needs better, but just wanted to make you aware that these were the top ones. Of course, the platform that we ended up choosing at Oregon HFMA was GoToWebinar. And the reason that we chose that initially was because it allowed us to get the number of participants that we wanted on at the time. And our chapter membership already had experience with this. We also had access through a vendor to a discounted license. And so we went ahead and piggybacked on that and paid the pricings there, $1,100. And of course, if we want to, that upgrade is available through GoToWebinar for the chapter to add certificates and online billing and doing some of the other cool things. One thing that's nice about the GoToWebinar is, of course, it allowed us to handle registrations, polling, unlimited recording, surveys, and all of those through that license. With that being shared, the association recently introduced a relationship that they have with Zoom. And so our chapter is now looking at that. This is some pricing that I got from the association, and any chapter can take advantage of this pricing. And it's pretty easy to get these licenses added as well. So the licenses are there. You can choose which one meets your needs based on the number of participants that you're going to be having in each session, how many licenses you need, and the type of license, and I have that listed out. I'm also including the link in this because if you follow that link, you can actually sign up very easily. It takes about 24 to 48 hours for you to have that license active, and then your chapter is ready to move forward utilizing Zoom, and you'd have access to that. And Zoom is an amazing platform. They've done a lot with that to enhance it recently. Best practices that we've learned along the way are the following. In selecting the platform, Michelle and I talk about all this all the time, but your chapter, if you have an expert that's better at Zoom or GoToWebinar, then utilize the platform where you have the expertise, because if they're running it, it's going to be better for those who are attending. Also know the license that you want. We were talking about this yesterday. If you know that you're going to have 300 people online, make sure you buy the right license or you'll be very sad. That happened to us, right, Michelle?
Yep.
Yep. Where we exceeded the number of licenses as we got into this more and more. So just know that. And also, if you're going to have multiple tracks going on at the same time, you're going to need more than one license, because you're going to have 2 sessions that are being recorded and broadcast at the same time. Find a vendor if you want to. If the Zoom, I think the pricing offered through the association is probably the best I've seen so far. So I would start there. That's my recommendation. But if you have other vendors who can provide it cheaper by backing off of their license, maybe a different platform, feel free to do that. Also, this is an opportunity for vendor partners to definitely reach out, and it could be even a sponsorship thing that they want to extend. A question that came up for us also with Zoom, because it hit the news, was just what is security for the Zoom platform? And really it's for any of these platforms. How do you keep your meeting secure and you make sure people aren't getting in? So the biggest thing that they recommend is, of course, adding a password to each session and putting people in a waiting room before they come in. Those are features when you're setting up your meeting that you can choose. I did get an update from Zoom just yesterday, I believe. Their next update, which is coming out at the end of May, will make it mandatory for people to actually do those. So again, best practice, I think they're implementing those in the actual softwares as we move forward. So with that, that's our session on selecting the best platform. Now we're going to turn it over to Michelle to talk a little bit about the equipment requirements.
Yeah, and just as the platform is important and will really, give you a great experience or give you a really tough experience, depending on which way, so is the equipment. One of the things that we learned the really hard way was that you really have to have a hard internet connection in whatever room you're going to be live streaming in. That you cannot rely on the Wi-Fi bandwidth to be reliant and to be fast enough to be able to do the streaming. We got all set up and we were really, really excited about a couple presenters we had, and we garnered a lot of excitement. We pushed on it really hard. We didn't think about the hardwire requirement, and we struggled for the entire 2 days trying to get enough bandwidth. I mean, we tried banning cell phones. We said, nope, you can't use your cell phones, you can't use your laptop, and we still didn't have enough Wi-Fi bandwidth. So just know that you really need to have a plug that goes from your computer to the wall, and with a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable. So, and that's really critical. And make sure your facilities group knows that, because that's not something that comes automatically with most of the facility setups and the most facility contracts. So that is a piece that does need to be added so that it's set up and it's not a surprise to everybody, because it may also drive where you set up the equipment. Because if you have a choice of being 4 feet away from the plug or being 18 feet away from the plug, you can probably guess that you're going to be better off 4 feet away than you are 18 feet away. So just be aware of that. A table seems a little silly, but you got to have some place to put all this stuff. So you're going to end up with computers, you're going to end up with different battery packs and different things, and just make sure you have a table. Again, it's not insurmountable if you don't have it on your request initially, but your facilities group and the facility you're working with will be very appreciative if they know ahead of time that you need a table. And I do recommend that it not be a round table. Putting computers and cords and people around a round table while projecting can be done in a pinch, but you're better off with either a square or rectangular table where you can all sit in a nice line alongside the one side of the table. Your video camera. We'll get in the next slides a little bit more detail about the video camera and the dongle. All of the online tools that Jeff was talking about, whether it be Zoom or GoToWebinar or WebEx, they are designed for webcams and built-in webcams, much like I'm using on my laptop here. It's built in, I turn it on and there it goes. But in order to get the full functionality and the full effect that you want of being in the room that you're really trying to present to, you really want to use a video camera. And so that is a purchase. It's not a purchase that you have to do every time you go to do a presentation. It's kind of a one-time purchase, but it's important. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Your wireless lapel mic. So your speakers will get the honor of wearing two mics. One will be the one that is the mic for the room and that will project, and everybody in the audience that's local and present will hear and use. And then there'll be the lapel mic for the webinar. That gives them that. So making sure that speakers are aware of that, oh, by the way, you're going to wear two lapel mics. You get some crazy looks the first time if somebody has not told them ahead of time. So if you can have your program chairs be the ones that tell them that, then you as the tech team don't get the crazy looks. Know the broadcast frequency of the conference center's wireless system. So back to our lapel mics. Look, you can't broadcast two separate microphone setups on the same frequency. So you need to make sure that there's some band frequency difference between what you're going to use for your tech committee equipment and what the wireless system of the conference center uses. You can adjust them, but you want to make sure you know that they're separate enough that you can that you're not going to interfere with each other. A minimum of 2 laptops are going to be needed, and you're going to need at least 2 USB ports on both laptops. Some laptops are not coming with USB ports anymore, so making sure that whatever laptop you grab has USB ports. And then a tripod for video camera. We've all probably seen the wonderful home movies where somebody's holding a home movie projector camcorder, and it makes you nauseated if you get motion sick like I do to watch it, because it's shaking and it's moving and everything, because they're really excited and they're bouncing up and down and they sit and sometimes even fall down. So the tripod is a great thing to just kind of keep your camera stable, and it allows for a really good viewing experience. We have it as desired. I'd almost say it's a little bit more than desired. A power strip or an extension power cord is really something that, because of all the laptops, the camera, all have to be plugged in. You don't want them going to sleep in the middle of the presentation because they're not plugged in. So making sure that you have those as something that's available. We actually bought at Oregon HFMA, it's a big roll, about yay big, and it has 4 plugs on it, and it's got one of the industrial strength cords, extension cords. So, and it's all in a reel. So it's all together, and then we just take that with us as part of our equipment, and it plugs into the wall, and it's safe. It's not one of your home, I'm expecting an extension cord with just one that you might use for your Christmas lights. This is one that will actually sustain the use of the laptops. And it is nice to have access to the lighting controls in the conference center so that you can kind of adjust them for broadcasting. We had a gentleman at one point who had really dark skin, wonderful speaker, really dark skin, wore fairly dark clothing, and was against a black backdrop. And you can figure that was not a great recording, and there was really nothing we could do about it because we couldn't get enough adjustment to the lights. He just blended in between his clothing and his skin tone and the backdrop. They all blended together, and we really worked hard to try to adjust that a little bit. But just being aware of those light settings and kind of thinking about that, kind of thinking about what is the skin tone of my presenter. Is it somebody who's a little bit more tan like Jeff, or is it somebody who's chronically pale like me? Even that little bit of difference can have some difference on your kind of what's best for lighting. And then moving on, here's what I promised. Here's the details. So microphone, wireless microphone. They're available for about $40. All of this stuff is available on Amazon most of the time. I'll mention that in just a second. But all of that is available. You can see on the picture on the left-hand side of your screen that it comes with a USB dongle. That's the reason for multiple USB ports on your laptop. And then you're also going to need something. We mentioned the dongles. So whether you're using a Mac or whether you're using a PC, you will need a dongle. They are different dongles. So Jeff uses a Mac and I use a PC. So we have two different dongles because depending on which one of us is hooking up our laptop to be the use of with the camera, we will need different HFMI to USB 3 HDMI capture dongles. We've listed off the descriptions of both of them. I will tell you that the one for the PC dongle my husband looked for the other day on Amazon, and they are all back ordered right now. I expect that in the coming days they will become available again, but with the current crisis, I think a lot of them have gotten consumed because of needs to do webinars and WebExes and things like that. Camcorder. A good quality camcorder. It does not have to be the $10,000 model. Ours ran about $285. It does need to have zoom in, zoom out features. It needs to have a speaker, plus the stream and record sessions, i.e. dig into the specs. So the one we went with is the Canon Xia HF-R80 camcorder, which is what's on the screen. There are others out there, but make sure you really dig into the specs and you take the verbiage that is on the screen, and that's what you're looking for in the specifications for the camcorder. So you probably aren't going to want the $50 camcorder. It's not going to work, and you're going to return it. We also tried that too. So it's another case of, going cheap for some of this is probably not your best option. The tripod, a tripod's a tripod, so you just need a tripod. Again, these are all available on Amazon.
And one thing I wanted to point out with you, Michelle, is just this is affordable. When I look at these numbers here, it wasn't a huge investment. And I think that's an important thing for anyone listening to know that this is very doable at the end of the day.
Very much so. Best practices. I mentioned a minute ago, don't go cheap. If you buy the $50 camcorder, you'll be returning it because it won't work. So just make sure you really, assess and look at what it is. Like Jeff just said, for $600 or less than, you can actually be up and running. Everything we've listed off here, you can obtain all of it for $600 or less. Know what laptops are available, either because your committee is going to have them available or the chapter owns them. Know what kind of laptops they are. So we just automatically carry the different kinds of dongles with us because of the differences in computers. But if all of your tech committee is using PC laptops and they've got Dells or something of that nature, don't bother buying a MacBook dongle. If you have a combination of equipment like we do, then buy both. This is a great, Jeff mentioned, but it's a great opportunity for a vendor partner, for a sponsor who might be willing to donate some of this equipment or help, donate fees to help purchase the equipment. That is really a great opportunity. And a lot of times you'll find a sponsor that is just really excited because that's something that they're really for. Maybe it's the niche in the market that they're in is that, and they're just really gung-ho for supporting your chapter on that. So it's a great opportunity to partner with them. The chapter does need to own the equipment. So even though Jeff wants to switch the slide on me, the chapter needs to own the equipment. Doesn't necessarily need to own the computers, but make sure that the chapter owns the camcorders and the dongles, and consider who's going to store it. I mean, this is not a massive amount of stuff, but it doesn't fit in just, under your dresser or your file cabinet in your office. You're going to have a place, a drawer, a closet, or something to tuck it into in between meetings, in between uses. Right now, the Oregon HFMA assigns it to either the technology committee chair or co-chair to kind of be the keeper of that. Okay, moving on.
Thanks, Michelle. One thing
Yeah.
that come up is definitely how do you utilize these platforms and take advantage of the registration, the billing, the reporting that needs to come from it when you're doing a presentation, surveys that are so important to the chapter, and of course, getting those CPE certifications back out the door. So first of all, I just want
Hmm.
to state that all of these platforms now come when you buy up and you have the premium version of them. They all come with live streaming, obviously, but also a registration platform. They have a billing application within them, reporting, tons of reporting available actually. You can see how active people are. And they now produce
Hmm.
certificates as well at the end of the day. So I know a lot of chapters we're all tied into CVent. So I'm going to talk about how we can utilize CVent here in a moment. But I did want to point out that these do come prepared with these already built in. So if your chapter is tied to CVent, as we are, we had to figure out a way, how do we do all of our billing through CVent? How do we make this work together? And so the following slides are going to walk us through how CVent works with, of course, all of these platforms. So using CVent with live streaming platforms, it's the following. You're still going to set up your sessions just like you would in CVent. But during the registration process, the registrant will navigate to the admissions page and they're going to select live streaming sessions. So if they know they're not going to be attending, then they'll select live streaming. In the Oregon chapter, we decided to offer live streaming sessions not just to our enterprise members, but also to any member who was at home, they wanted to join a certain session. They're able to go in and pay for that. The enterprise members aren't required to pay, but anyone who's not an enterprise member would be paying. Then we go ahead and we bill that appropriately. So these are the slides just showing it set up in CVent and how they would select that. After they select the live streaming, then the next page will show just the live streaming sessions that are available to them. They'll go ahead and choose which ones they want. Again, in our chapter, we have chosen to charge $25 for live streaming because our goal is to actually get them to come to a live event if they want to. And we felt like that
Hmm.
price pushed it up enough that they had to decide, well, I'm paying about the same as if I would be there if they actually went to all the sessions, or maybe even a little bit more. So why don't I just show up in person and enjoy some of those networking opportunities that the live face-to-face allows. But in this, again, once they select it, they're set up so if they are an enterprise member, they are not charged, but if they aren't, then those fees apply. And this page here in CVent shows just the summary of the registration and the
Hmm.
session that they selected. And again, no charge for enterprise members, but there would be a charge for those who are non-enterprise members in our chapter. And then, of course, a summary of the charges, how much they're going to be billed. And the great thing about this is then it goes into just submitting that payment. And once they do submit payment, upon completion, they're going to receive an email that lets them know that they are confirmed for that. And then 6 days prior to the conference, they'll get another email that will actually give them the webinar information. The reason we don't send the webinar information in advance is because they have the potential of canceling the registration, and we don't want that sitting out there with the password, ease of access
Hmm.
to the webinar unless they're committed and they can't get out of paying for it. So that's why 6 days prior to the conference, we actually do release that link with the password and how to get in and all that information to them. And of course, they get additional emails letting them know that the session's about ready to start and different things like that that generate naturally through the platform that we're using. Of course, 6 days in advance, one thing that we do have to bring up is these platforms are great. So your Zoom, your GoToWebinar, all of those are great at getting a lot of data and even putting it into Excel where you can send that to somebody. They're not so great at importing data into them. So they don't have a great import feature at all. They actually are a manual entry. That's the way they were designed originally. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens on our end is our CVent administrator sends the tech team a list of all those live streaming registrations, which includes the information that we need. We go into our platform, we manually enter those in, and that is, of course, what kicks off the information that they're going to be joining and all of that and those additional emails. So then after completion of the live streaming event, our CVent administrator generates an email with a survey and also sends out the certificates. So we gave her access to actually get into our platform. She can see who's there. If she needs, we can send her a list of all of those as well. How many people were really active for the whole time? How many were there just for 30 minutes? And that is how we've kind of figured out how to use CVent with these live streaming platforms to accomplish what we need to do within the chapter. So just a couple of best practices here. Again, the software platforms actually have all of this built in. I think it would be easier if we could just use the platforms themselves to do it, but we are also tied to CVent for other reasons. So it's important to understand how they work together. Of course, chapters will have to spend money on those professional licenses. Just FYI, if you want to get some of these nicer features, such as the certificate generation, that does only exist in those really high-end versions of that. And then just a reminder on all of these registration, billing, reporting, use your social media to drive that registration, use your websites, and do all those to create that excitement around it and to let them know also that those CPE credits will be coming and how they'll be showing up. So those are just some of the best practices that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note that, you know, while listening to Jeff talk about having to manually create the attendees in the platforms the 6 days prior that he was mentioning on the last slide, it seems really daunting the first time you hear it, but having done it for several of our events now, it's not nearly as daunting as it sounds. You hit a rhythm, you hit a stride, it becomes, you can copy paste a lot of that. So if you get the CVent list, you can copy the names and the email addresses from, you know, from your CVent list to your webinar platform. And it actually, I mean, you can plow through the names rather quickly. So don't let that become kind of a barrier in your mind, because it's not nearly the barrier that it kind of feels like the first time you hear it.
Great point. Thanks, Michelle. So moving on, Michelle, you want to cover some of those chapter requirements, best practices?
Yeah. So, you know, Oregon HFMA has learned a lot in our pathway, and we have an amazing set of volunteers who do a lot of time in a lot of different committees. And historically, Oregon HFMA had a communications committee, and that was kind of where they really focused on the website and social media and some things like that. Well, as this has continued to grow and morph, we decided, well, maybe communications wasn't completely an accurate name. So we now call it the Tech and Communications Committee. And that committee really does have the oversight to the website, to all these go-to webinars, the live streaming, the video content, the social media, the podcast. I mean, the sky's the limit on the things that can be thought of, as our other chairs are, and our board and our leaders are amazing at figuring out. It seems like every time we turn around, they're coming up with a new great idea that's cool, and it engages people and leaves Jeff and I scratching our head going, okay, now we got to wrap our minds around how to do this one. And we've gotten to where we've hit our stride. That said, you have to have a super, super close tie to your CVent admin, if applicable, or whoever you're using for your registrations. You need to be really tied closely to them, because you need to work together to share the data, to have the information going back and forth. Your program chairs, who puts together your committee, your program, who puts together your live events, all of those things that go together. You've got to be able to work together with them, have close information, to the tune of actually sharing cell phone numbers is actually probably a pretty good level of how much information you guys will go back and forth sharing. And hey, this is outstanding. How quickly do you need it? Or, I'm having troubles with this. Can you help me with that? Email works great, but sometimes there will be times that you really need that close contact that I think of when you think of really cell phone contact. Your local leadership, obviously, being information, because they're going to be the driver of a lot of kind of what your scope is. Your membership committee is also going to be another key group, because they're going to be the ones that can help sometimes push social media. They can help push the podcast. They can help push the live streams. They just can often be your go-to group. And one group we didn't actually list on here is your networking committee. Sometimes our networking committee is actually one of our greatest assets when it comes to pushing the webinars and the live stream events, because they're out there pushing it and they come up with some amazing things that really kind of gain the excitement for people. Working with your program chairs and your leadership to have good, clear expectations with the presenters in the live audience. I mentioned the mic packs. That's just a really simple example of making sure that the people who are coming in to present are aware. They're going to be recorded. They're going to be on tape. It's going to be recorded. It's going to be shared. And oh, by the way, we're actually going to publish it also. So making sure that they're really just kind of aware of it so that they're not surprised. We'll talk about in a little bit later about kind of how you can do some of that. And your members. I threaten glue on people's chairs regularly at live stream events because, all of us adults and even us that have kids working, at home now helping us work, are aware that we don't sit still very well. We get up, we get down, we go take a cell phone call because we've got something urgent that comes in, or that cup of coffee because it's that 8 a.m. session really needs to be refilled. And so they walk and they stand up and they walk in front of the camera. And then they're embarrassed because they got caught on camera walking right in front of the camera. So really, we make an announcement every single session. We're recording, we're streaming, don't walk in front of the camera, don't walk in front of the camera. They still walk in front of the camera, but at least some of them think about whether they should walk in front of the camera. And some of them, it's really kind of fun to sit there and watch because they'll decide whether they bend forward to go under the camera or whether they decide to do the limbo and bend backwards. And every once in a while, we'll have somebody who tries to bend backwards and go under the camera. And that really makes for a fun event. Do a trial run through the event prior to the first live streaming session. You probably don't want your first stream session of your conference to be the first time you hook up the camera, the first time you plug into the wall, all of those kinds of things. So doing a trial run is a good idea. Now, you may or may not be able to do it the day before. You can hook up all the equipment the day before and do the trial run, but some of the facilities charge per day for that hard wire cord that we talked about plugging into the Wi so that you aren't pulling off Wi-Fi. And if that's the case, you may want to consider just making it earlier in the day of the event so that you're not paying an extra fee for that connection. Make sure that you have members who are there on site, logged in as if they were just listening to it back in the office. And also, if we always end up, it seems like, with one or two tech team members, or at least phone a friend type of people that don't make it to the events. And so we have them call into the live streaming. We don't charge them. We have them we give them the direct login. And they log in, and then they can give us real-time feedback of, you got static like crazy. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you need to go check the frequency of the mic packs or something, and they can give you real-time feedback. So that's always really helpful. That's another good case for cell phone sharing. And then making sure that there's a question and answer panel. So in all of the webinar platforms, there's a Q&A session where people can ask questions and say, hey, I really don't understand what you mean when you say dongle. Can you please help me? Making sure somebody's actually reading that, is logged in. That's another case of having extra PCs around. Somebody who can log in, who can see those questions and can actually answer the questions, or actually say, hey, Michelle, you're the presenter. Can you help answer this question? So just being the eyes and ears for those people that are back in the office and want to be able to listen. And then start your session 10 minutes early, at least 5, if not 10 minutes early, so that you can make sure it launches, make sure that you've got sound, make sure that you've got people that can get in, and just all of those kinds of double checks. Because that way you're not delaying the presentation in the room while you work out some of those kinks. So the more you can work out ahead of time, the better off and the less stressful it is for everybody. Anything to add, Jeff? Okay.
Oh, that's great.
All right. So, and I think the key thing, the key driver to just use this kind of your overarching, this is really what our goal is you want to create as close as you possibly can an online experience that would be just like attending in person. So if there's going to be a poll, if they're going to ask, if your speaker is going to run a poll of how many people have, children under the age of 5 in the household during COVID that they were trying to work with, make sure you know that ahead of time so that you can put it into the webinar so that your online audience can participate too. Because you know what? They may have more 5-year-olds at home than your in-person audience. So just making sure that that can really be just that back and forth experience as much as you can. And then as you go through and as you set up your sessions, you really want to make sure that you brand it, that you kind of have just that full sponsorship acknowledgement. If you have sponsors that are involved in specific sessions, bios for your speakers, pictures of your speakers, all of those things are just amazing things to make sure that they're part of your webinar platform as you set up the webinars. And then we get to best practices. And I have to move the window. Hang on just a second, and I will move the window so I can read the whole slide. So just as we said, you want it to be as close as in person as possible. Get the speaker's presentation ahead of time so that you can load it into the webinar platform. What will happen is you'll actually have an extra laptop the laptop that's plugged into the camera will also be running the presentation so that you're not dependent upon the presentation in the room on the screen, because the experience for the person back home is not going to be great if that's what you're dependent on. So the webinar platforms allow you to run the PowerPoint presentation at the same time that you're also streaming and that you can have a person seeing it. So make sure you get those presentations ahead of time and load them to the webinar platform, and then you'll run them simultaneously. Making sure that you actually move the slides. Have somebody paying attention. This is not an option where you can multitask and be working on stuff in the office or patient accounts or something and doing the live streaming and monitoring the camera. There's no way you can do all of that. So you really are going to need to have somebody that can be focused. And if the presenter in the room advances your slide by 1, then you who's running the computer has to advance the slide by 1 also. Record the video on both the software platform, just like we're doing today in Zoom as we do this presentation, but you're also going to record it on the memory card. That way, if something goes wrong with Zoom or something of that nation, you have a backup. And so by putting it on a memory card in your camcorder, then you'll have a secondary copy of the presentation. As you buy the camcorder, that may be something to think about looking. We didn't include that in an earlier slide, but you may want to consider the amount of memory in the camcorder, or even just buying, for really cheap anymore, you can buy really big memory cards. And so just having that so you can pop it into the camcorder for that. We've already talked about the polls and the questions, so making sure that that's there, making sure that the person who's monitoring it can actually share the results with the speakers. Sometimes the speakers actually have a lot of fun with that. They'll get the poll in the room and then they'll turn and say, okay, but how many did we have online? And that's just a fun kind of engaging opportunity for that. Support materials. So, I already have talked about loading the PowerPoint so that you have that. But if they're going to do handouts, some speakers love to bring, 10 or 15 handouts to hand out to the room. Maybe they're, cards, reference cards for future things, or things that give enlightenment or give uplifting messages or things like that. Those are the kinds of things that if you can get a hold of a copy of those ahead of time, then you can upload them. Don't publish them. Don't spoil the surprise for the speaker, but you can upload them so that they're available. Polls we've talked about. And then whoever's running your camcorder has to be somebody who's willing to also stay engaged. Again, we're not going to play with cell phones or multitask. We've got to zoom in and out. So this is kind of odd to Jeff and I because we're not moving in and out. I mean, unless I rock back in my rocking chair here, we're not moving in and out of the camera range. But normally when you watch TV or you watch other things, the camera is going in and out and zooming and rounding, you know, almost to the point of making you dizzy sometimes. So you want your camera person running, they're going to go in and out. They're going to zoom in and out, and they're going to take the presentation so that they keep it close. Sometimes it's going to be really close. Sometimes they can get some really good facial expressions from the speaker. But sometimes coming back and giving a little bit more of the entire stage a feel is going to be helpful. If you have a panel, going from one speaker to another is good instead of just staying wide angle for the panel the entire time. So just making sure that, think about what would I want to see if I was back at home in the office, what would I want to see, and then having them mimic that. And then every once in a while, you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand and remind the speaker that there's an online audience. Sometimes they forget, especially during that question and answer session that all of our speakers do at the end. They need to repeat the question. So we try very, very hard to have the person asking the question speak into a mic. If they do so, the speaker's mic will pick up the question and that will be fine. But not always do they wait for the mic, especially if it's a really full room and it's going to take a bit for that mic to get there. Sometimes they'll just shout out the question. Well, your online audience isn't going to hear that shouted out question. So then really making sure that speaker repeats the question so that before they answer the question, so that your online audience has any idea what question they're answering. Otherwise, the answer isn't going to work, isn't going to be very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to add also on the importance of the camera, and the reason that you went with a higher end camera was with the ability to pull back and move around. I know there are times that people are communicating from the floor, right? Those are the attendees that have great comments. Being able to move the camera on top of them so that people can see who's making that comment is great for the online audience as well, like you said. Now, I know, Michelle, you've touched a lot also throughout what you've shared about the speaker and their requirements. So would you like to lead us through that as well?
Sure. First and foremost, make sure your speakers have agreed to be recorded and have their content live streamed via multiple digital media applications and recorded for future use by the chapter. Some of your speakers, this will be something that they have to run. You know, we've had a couple of speakers over the time who actually had to consult their legal department to have this approved. You know, oftentimes those are the groups that are kind of coming out of an attorney industry anyway. So just making sure that they are aware of it. Making sure that your speakers, and that should be part of your contract with them. And I think on the next slide, we talk about that a little bit more. Also making sure your speakers send the presentation ahead of time. So you really don't want them to walk in the day of and 5 minutes before they start speaking, hand you their presentation. They need to send it to you ahead of time. Oregon HFMA has the speakers send it to the program chairs, who then are responsible for getting it over to the tech committee. So the tech committee is not the face to the speakers ahead of time. We have our program chairs continue to fill that role. Along with getting the questions or any polling, trying to get that a week in advance will allow your tech committee time to get that uploaded and actually get that set up. Also, make sure your presentations are in a PowerPoint format, not a PDF. A lot of us tend to PDF things before we send them out publicly, but in that case, it will not work with the webinar program platforms to use a PDF. It really does have to be a presentation. Now, for uploading for future reference, you know, you could use a PDF, but for the live stream event, it really, really has to be a PowerPoint. It cannot be a PDF, and I can't stress that enough because we have really run into that over the time as being a problem. And then they must also be wearing, we mentioned the 2 mics. So, you know, they need to have an availability to actually put 2 packs on their hands or on their waist. So particularly for, you know, if someone's going to wear a dress, making sure that there's some way for them to do that. Because sometimes we've had people who've come and they're, you know, in this beautiful dress and they intend to hold the mic pack in their hand because that's what they do. Well, one mic pack's great, but two mic packs doesn't work so well. So, and it really causes kind of an unfortunate and somewhat embarrassing situation to try to figure out how do I attach a mic pack to this dress that's gorgeous and there's no place to put it. So we've had to be creative a couple of times. And then on the screen is kind of an example of the release and consent form. So making sure that they are very aware that this is what it is, that this is what they're agreeing to, that they're going to be, it's going to be live streamed, it's going to be recorded, all of those kinds of things. Throw in the photographs at the same time so that if somebody takes photographs that you can use for social media and things like that, make sure you go ahead and get that as part of your release. It allows you to create social, kind of social media presence. It can also encourage attendance, tag them, give them credit. I mean, a lot of our speakers anymore have a LinkedIn profile. They have Twitters and Instagrams and all of the different platforms that are used. Give them credit, because a lot of times then they will use that, and that's something they can use as a way of reaching out to other people. So it kind of is a give and take, and it works really well because it goes both directions. And then, hang on, I gotta move this again. So only contract with presenters who are willing to be live streamed and recorded. Seems a little like a line in the sand, but I would encourage you, you really don't want to get into a situation where this presenter will allow us to videotape them and live stream it, but that one will not. Because then you've got people who are really eager, who really want to talk about it. They hear about HFMA, they hear about your local chapter HFMA and the upcoming seminar, and they really want to participate. But then the one that they really care about the most, because it's a really applicable topic, hasn't agreed to be live streamed. And then you've just kind of set yourself up for frustration. So really focusing on that. Especially now as we've all gotten used to webinars, I think more people are becoming more comfortable with the idea of live streams and being recorded, but just really being aware that that's still, you want to be respectful. Ensure they understand that presentation environment. We've talked a lot about that. And also about, that online presence, the questions and things like that. And if your program chairs get into a situation where the presenter is asking questions that they can't answer or they're not comfortable answering, then the tech committee can step in and help answer that questions. And sometimes letting your program chair step out of the middle of it and you working directly with the presenter can be really beneficial too. Anything to add, Jeff?
No, thank you so much, Michelle.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Before we go into producing and sharing recorded content, we just wanted to state that it may appear like we're going through a lot of detail here, and we're purposely doing that to share with you the things that we've learned. It is very easy to do. We do want to stress that. It looks like a lot of detail, and to make it perfect, sure, that's why we're sharing all these things that we've learned, but you can also just do it and throw it out there. And that goes with producing and sharing the recorded content as well. As we jump into this section, we don't want anyone to feel like they have to do this. All of the platforms have the recording capabilities. They will produce a video that is ready for you to push out to YouTube or to a website or to whatever platform you're using to share that. A lot of these already have their own platform that you can share within Zoom, or you can share within, they're called stages, where you can actually go to that stage and watch different videos that were produced by the chapter. So those are there, you just provide the link and you would be done. Our chapter, we want to make sure that the recorded product also represents the speaker very well. So we take a little bit of time to do some editing on it. It also helps us to brand it with the chapter. As Michelle said, it's a little shout out to the speaker as well when you do a nice branding, maybe some lead-in music and stuff like that. So anyone watching it has a good experience. So I'm going to walk you through how you can use some editing software to go ahead and edit that and produce a really nice recording that you can share. Again, that being stated, you can just grab what's recorded in either Zoom or in GoToWebinar or things like that. and share the link, and people can go straight to that particular video. So you don't have to spend too much time, but if you're excited about doing some, especially sponsorship highlights, this is where you can add sponsor content to the video. Maybe you have a sponsor who brought that speaker in, so you want to give additional, highlights to that. Well, you're going to want to edit in a little snap about them, or things like any other content that you might want to add in. So editing does allow the chapter to spotlight that content. Editing the content also tends to get more views. I'm just going to be honest. A really nice published video, more people will come back to it and share it versus just the general one. And especially if you start, I just want to share this, if you start your session early, which you should do, as Michelle said, about 10 minutes early, then you're going to be recording a lot of stuff of just people walking around getting ready to start. If you don't chop that off and people go in to watch that, they get a little confused. So I do recommend editing where you can. Again, you don't have to, but I do recommend it. Broadcasting those through social media platforms is a great way to remind the members that not only did you have the session, but you have content that adds value to their membership, because they can go back and watch that time and time again. They can also watch it with other team members that they have internally, and it just really adds to the HFMA membership experience. These are some of the editing platforms that are out there. So if you go to edit, these are pretty common. If you're using a Mac like I do, it has iMovie. It's a really powerful tool. You don't have to pay anything else for it. If you have a Mac, it just comes standard. If you have a PC, then you will want to buy one of the platforms, depending on your budget and your skill set. They're all pretty easy to use, to be honest. It doesn't take a lot to walk through those. And we'd be happy to do another session on just editing itself and how to do that in the different platforms. Perhaps we'll do that at a different time. Once you're done editing, you of course want to share. And right now, these are some of the ways that people are sharing. Again, each one of those platforms has what's called a stage. They may not call it that. I know GoToWebinar calls it a stage. I'm not sure what Zoom calls it, but they have a place where you can store the content, share a link, and people can go right back to that. YouTube is free. And YouTube is great because YouTube allows you to also block it with a password if you want to, or you can open it up for sharing. It also gives you great stats on how many times it was watched and how far into it they went, so that you know how to modify it in the future. And of course, Facebook has become another great video sharing platform. I think a lot of us have our Facebook pages, a chapter Facebook page, so that's another great place to place the video, or at least place the link to be shared. On producing and sharing these, some of the best practices, again, the better the audio and the video, the more likely members will watch. We provided a link of one that we did where we added the music and all of that, and you can just see that it's been watched more than some of the other ones. And it's not just because of the title, it's because the experience is really good. Choosing an editing software that is affordable. If you have a Mac, again, it's free. Maybe some of your sponsors have it, like we mentioned before. They're willing to help there, or maybe because they'll brand it, they're willing to do the work for your chapter. So there's something to consider. Of course, when possible, add that branding for that sponsor and for the chapter. And in some situations, if the video is really poor, as Michelle mentioned, sometimes you get a poor recording of the video. But if the camcorder's recording, it's clear. It just looks bad on the GoToWebinar or on the Zoom when it was broadcasting. So if you want that clear image, because you have it recorded already on your camcorder, that was that second recording, you can overlay that video, as we did on that one example Michelle was talking about, to brighten up the speaker and to make it look really crisp and clear. So those are just options for you we wanted to share. And with that, I think that's all we had, was just for any questions and answers.
And as you watch this, in the days to come, because we don't have an audience in front of us at this point, we encourage you to email either one of us. We are more than happy to share, to talk. We can jump on a call with you. We are resources to help you, because our desire is to really see all chapters be successful in this effort. and to be able to share with greater numbers of members and engage just kind of across their platforms and their continuum of membership.
And I just want to add, I think it's a lot of fun too. So if there is any chapter
Yeah.
watching out there, it's been a really fun way to engage membership. It's fun to do. It really makes you pay attention a little bit more to every presentation being done if you're on the end that use it. So that's another great benefit of doing this. And of course, just bring more value to the members of your chapter. So again, as Michelle said, if you have questions, if you need our assistance on anything, we're an open book and we're happy to share.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. We hope you got some valuable information, and may the force be with us all, right?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
All right. Bye.